There is a war that no one sees, a battle fought in silence, no weapons, no blood, no open conflict, yet the victories shape the course of lives. You have enemies, whether you acknowledge them or not. Some wear smiles while hiding daggers, some move against you in the shadows. Some are not people at all, but forces, jealousy, manipulation, betrayal, doubt. The greatest warriors in history understood one truth: the most powerful victories are won without a fight. The mind is the battlefield. The sharpest weapons are patience, perception, and unshakable control. Sun Tzu, the ancient master of strategy, warned, "The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting." But long before Sun Tzu, the Stoics knew an even greater secret, a way to defeat not only your enemies, but to ensure they can never harm you again. The weak crave revenge. The strong eliminate the need for it. Today, I will reveal to you 6 secret ways to destroy your enemy without lifting a single finger. These are not the strategies of the reckless, but of the masters. These methods are ancient, tested, and undeniable. What you're about to hear will challenge the way you see power. It will force you to look at conflict differently. If you understand these principles, you will never fear another enemy again. Make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't yet. Every like, subscribe helps us continue our mission of sharing knowledge. And leave a comment below and share your opinion on these strategies, or tell me which one resonates with you the most. Ready to unlock more wisdom? Let's get started. Way 1. The art of making your enemy destroy themselves. There is no greater victory than watching your enemy crumble by their own hands. True power is not in confrontation, but in the ability to make those who stand against you unravel on their own. This is not magic. It is not deception. It is the highest form of strategy, an art known only to those who see beyond the surface of conflict. What I'm about to tell you is not for the impulsive. It is not for the reckless who seek immediate satisfaction. This is for the patient, the disciplined, and the truly powerful. Those who master this secret will never need to fight, because their enemies will unknowingly walk themselves into their own downfall. The greatest enemies in history were never destroyed by swords or armies. They fell because of their own arrogance, their inability to control their desires, their failure to understand the invisible forces moving against them. Julius Caesar was not taken down by an opposing army. He was surrounded by men he trusted, men whose ambitions he failed to see. Napoleon was not conquered on the battlefield. He was undone by his own hunger for control, his refusal to recognize limits. Most enemies are weak, even when they appear strong. They are ruled by their emotions: pride, greed, jealousy, anger. They believe their aggression makes them powerful, but in reality, it makes them vulnerable. A man who cannot control his emotions is a man who can be controlled. A man who acts without thought is a man who can be led into traps of his own making. So, how do you make your enemy destroy themselves? You do not attack them directly. You do not challenge them openly. You step back, you observe. You learn what fuels them, what drives them, what they cannot resist. Every man has a weakness. Every enemy has a blind spot. Your job is not to fight them. It is to let them walk into the fire they have built for themselves. Silence is your greatest weapon. Your enemy expects resistance, expects retaliation, expects you to meet them at their level. But when you do nothing, when you remain still, they begin to doubt. They begin to wonder why you are not reacting. And doubt is the seed of destruction. When a man starts questioning his own position, his own power, his own influence, he begins to crack. Imagine an enemy who thrives on conflict. He attacks you, provokes you, waiting for your reaction. But instead of responding, you remain calm, unshaken. He grows frustrated. He pushes harder. He makes mistakes. He overextends himself. He lashes out at the wrong people. His anger consumes him, and soon he is no longer attacking you. He is fighting ghosts, enemies that do not exist, battles that lead to his own ruin. The greatest generals, the greatest leaders, and the greatest strategists of history all understood this principle. They knew that the fiercest battles are won long before swords are drawn. They understood that a man who cannot control himself will eventually destroy himself. Epictetus, the great Stoic philosopher, once said, "If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation." The moment you react emotionally, you have already lost. But if you control yourself, if you master your impulses, you become untouchable. There's a story of a wise ruler who had many enemies. They plotted against him, spread lies, tried to turn his people against him. But the ruler did not respond. He did not fight back with anger. Instead, he did something much more powerful. He let his enemies expose themselves. He waited, he watched, and in time, their greed, their arrogance, and their inability to control their own ambitions led to their downfall. They turned on each other. They destroyed themselves. And in the end, the wise ruler stood victorious. Not because he fought, but because he refused to. Your enemy expects you to fight. He expects you to engage, to react, to play his game. The moment you refuse, the moment you step back and let him wrestle with his own demons, he is already defeated. Let your enemies burn themselves out. Let them waste their energy on battles that do not exist. Let them fall victim to their own weaknesses. And when the dust settles, when they stand among the ruins of their own making, you will still be standing, untouched, undefeated. This is the first way to destroy your enemy without fighting, by making them their own worst enemy. Patience, silence, and control are your weapons. Learn to use them, and no one will ever be able to harm you again. Way 2. The power of disappearance. How to make your enemy collapse in your absence. There is a force more powerful than confrontation, more devastating than revenge, and more terrifying to your enemy than any open conflict. It is not violence, nor is it manipulation. It is something far more subtle, yet infinitely more destructive. It is the power of disappearance. The ability to remove yourself so completely that your enemy's very foundation begins to crumble in your absence. Most men believe that power is measured by presence. They believe that to defeat an enemy, one must stand tall, push forward, and assert dominance. But this is a misconception. True power is often found in what is absent, rather than what is present. A man who understands this principle holds a weapon that few recognize, yet all fear. Consider this. What happens when a leader suddenly disappears? What happens when a pillar of influence is removed without warning? The structure they once supported does not remain standing. It wobbles, it shakes, it fractures. The absence of something strong does not leave an empty void. It creates chaos, confusion, and weakness in everything that depended upon it. Your enemy, no matter how powerful he seems, is not self-sufficient. He relies on opposition, on reaction, on the presence of something to push against. Take that away, and he begins to wither. The greatest mistake you can make is to assume that your enemy's strength is his alone. No, his strength is built on the dynamic between you and him. He feeds off conflict, thrives on resistance, gains energy from your attention. But what happens when you simply remove yourself? What happens when you disappear from the game entirely? You take away his ability to define himself, to measure his power, to assert control. You do not need to attack him. You need only take away what sustains him. Imagine a man who has built his entire identity around opposing you. He spreads rumors, he tries to damage your reputation, he seeks to provoke you at every turn. He needs your reaction because it validates his efforts. But one day, without warning, you disappear. You do not defend yourself. You do not retaliate. You simply vanish from his reach. What happens next? At first, confusion. He wonders where you have gone, why you are not reacting. He seeks more ways to draw you back in. He becomes louder, more aggressive, more desperate. But no matter what he does, you are nowhere to be found. Then comes frustration. He begins to fight battles against an enemy who is no longer there. He tries to maintain the war, but with no opponent, it feels hollow. And then comes the collapse. The very energy he used to fight you begins to turn inward. Without an enemy to fight, he becomes restless, paranoid. He lashes out at those around him. He starts making mistakes. He starts creating new enemies where there are none. His empire, no matter how strong, begins to decay. And in the end, he is left alone, fighting shadows, while you remain untouchable. This principle is not new. The ancient Stoics knew that the most powerful man is the one who does not need to engage in petty battles. Marcus Aurelius, the great Stoic emperor, wrote in his Meditations, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." This is the essence of the power of disappearance. When you remove yourself from the equation, you deny your enemy the ability to use you as fuel for his actions. There is a reason why some of the most powerful figures in history understood the value of retreat, of calculated withdrawal. The samurai knew that stepping back could often lead to a greater strike. The most brilliant generals knew that vanishing from the battlefield could cause more damage than a direct assault. The wise rulers of the past understood that sometimes the greatest destruction comes not from fighting, but from simply walking away. But make no mistake, this is not cowardice. Disappearance is not about running from conflict. It is about removing yourself strategically, allowing the enemy's own structure to collapse under its own weight. It is about refusing to feed his fire, allowing it to burn itself out instead. The enemy who depends on your presence will never survive your absence. Imagine an empire built on opposition. It thrives because it has something to resist. The moment that opposition is gone, the empire begins to turn against itself. It begins to crumble under the pressure of its own uncertainty. If you wish to destroy your enemy without fighting, you must become the unseen force that holds their entire world together. And then, without warning, remove yourself. When you master this, you will see its power everywhere. The toxic people in your life who thrive on your reactions, they collapse when you no longer give them attention. The adversaries who attempt to drag you into conflict, they lose their purpose when you do not engage. The enemies who rely on your resistance to validate their own power, they fade into irrelevance when you disappear from their grasp. Your presence is a currency. It is valuable. But most men spend it foolishly, engaging in battles that do not need to be fought, wasting energy on conflicts that should never have existed. If you learn to control your presence, to give it only where it serves you, and to withdraw it when it serves your enemy, you will hold a power that few can comprehend. The weak man believes he must always be seen, always be heard, always be fighting to prove his strength. The strong man knows that sometimes the most terrifying thing he can do is simply disappear. Let your enemy search for you in the darkness. Let him grasp for something that is no longer there. Let him exhaust himself chasing shadows. And when he is finally lost, confused and broken by his own desperation, only then will he realize that he was never truly fighting you. He was fighting himself all along. Way 3. The subtle art of turning your enemy's strength against them. Power is a double-edged sword. The very thing that makes a man strong can also be the source of his greatest downfall. But only those who understand this truth can use it to their advantage. The weak try to overpower their enemies directly, meeting force with force, aggression with aggression. The wise, however, know a deeper secret. The easiest way to destroy an enemy is not by fighting him, but by allowing his own strength to become the weight that crushes him. This is not a new concept. It is as old as warfare itself. The greatest generals, the most cunning philosophers, the most strategic minds in history all understood one thing: no man is truly invincible. No empire, no leader, no warrior stands without weakness. And often that weakness is hidden in what appears to be strength. Consider water. It is soft, formless, without resistance, and yet over time it carves through mountains, wears down stone, and reshapes the very earth itself. Why? Because it does not meet force with force. It allows the strength of its opponent to be its downfall. The mountain does not defeat water, it is eroded by it. The stone does not crush water, it is consumed by it. This is the principle at the heart of true power. Not resisting, but redirecting. Your enemy has a strength he relies on. It may be his intelligence, his influence, his ability to manipulate others, his physical power, or his reputation. But whatever it is, it blinds him. Strength makes a man feel untouchable, invincible. He believes it will always protect him. And that belief is what you will use to bring about his downfall. The first step is observation. You must study your enemy as a sculptor studies stone, seeing not only what is on the surface, but what is hidden beneath. Where does he draw his confidence? What does he depend on? What does he believe makes him untouchable? The more arrogant a man is, the easier this becomes. His own ego will reveal his weakness to you, because he will always put his strength on display. A man who believes he is feared will make fear his greatest weapon. A man who believes he is admired will use admiration as his shield. And a man who relies on his influence will assume he can always control those around him. Once you understand this, you do not need to attack directly. You only need to let your enemy's own strength become his trap. If he prides himself on his intelligence, you let him overthink until he ties himself in knots. If he thrives on his reputation, you do not challenge it. You let him tarnish it with his own actions. If he depends on fear, you show him someone who is not afraid, forcing him to escalate until his own aggression makes him reckless. History is filled with men who fell not because of their enemies, but because of themselves. Napoleon, a master of strategy, was ultimately destroyed not by a stronger force, but by his own relentless ambition. He believed he could conquer all, and that belief drove him to stretch his power too thin, leading to his own ruin. Julius Caesar, a man of unparalleled influence, was not defeated by an opposing army, but by his own senators, men who once admired him but grew to fear his rising dominance. In both cases, their strength, Napoleon's hunger for conquest, Caesar's unshakable influence, became the very thing that led to their downfall. This principle is deeply rooted in Stoic philosophy. The Stoics understood that everything in life contains the seed of its opposite. Strength can become weakness. Power can become vulnerability. Even success can become failure if one does not recognize the dangers within it. Seneca, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, warned of this when he said, "No man is crushed by misfortune unless he has first been deceived by prosperity." The same is true for your enemy. His greatest misfortune will come from the thing he trusts most. But this is not about direct confrontation. The weak attack, the wise redirect. You do not need to break a man when he is willing to break himself. You do not need to strip him of his strength when he is already using it to build the rope that will hang him. Your only task is to guide him, subtly, patiently, toward his own destruction. Imagine a king who rules through fear. His people obey him, not out of loyalty, but out of terror. He believes this makes him powerful, but over time, his rule becomes unbearable. His own advisors begin to resent him. His soldiers no longer fight for him with passion, only obligation. His people whisper rebellion in the streets, and yet he does not see it. He believes his strength is absolute. He believes fear will always protect him. Until one day he looks around and realizes he stands alone. The fear that once made him powerful has turned into the very thing that destroys him. Now imagine you are facing an enemy like this. What do? You do not need to fight him directly. You do not need to challenge his rule. You simply let his own strength do the work for you. You allow him to push harder, to become more oppressive, to make more enemies than allies. You allow his own arrogance to blind him, his own actions to isolate him, his own methods to make him weaker. And in the end, when his power collapses, you have done nothing but wait. The beauty of this method is that it requires no direct effort. It is not about aggression or violence. It is about patience, about understanding human nature, about knowing that no man is immune to the weight of his own unchecked strength. It is a quiet war, a battle fought in the shadows, where your greatest weapon is simply knowing when to step back and let nature take its course. This is why the greatest warriors in history were not always the strongest, but the most patient. They knew that every force, no matter how powerful, has a breaking point. They knew that the more a man relies on a single strength, the more vulnerable he becomes to it. And they knew that if you give a man enough time, enough freedom to push himself to his limits, he will often be the one to tear himself apart. So the next time you face an enemy, do not rush into battle. Do not meet strength with strength. Step back, observe. Learn what he trusts, what he relies on, what he believes makes him untouchable, and then, with patience and precision, let that very thing be the cause of his undoing. He will never see it coming. He will believe he is winning. He will think he is growing stronger, when in reality, he is building his own downfall with every move he makes. And when he finally falls, when he looks back to understand how he was defeated, he will realize too late that the enemy who destroyed him was never you. It was himself all along. Way 4. The mastery of influence, controlling the enemy without them knowing. There exists a power greater than brute force, more effective than direct confrontation, and far more devastating than any physical battle. It is the power of influence, the ability to control the thoughts, decisions, and actions of another without them realizing they are being guided. This is the weapon of emperors, the art of rulers, the skill of those who shape history from behind the curtain. The man who masters influence does not need to fight his enemy because his enemy unknowingly fights for him. The weak believe that power comes from aggression, from making their presence known, from forcing their will onto others. But the wise know that true power is subtle, invisible, woven into the fabric of the world, like a hidden current beneath the waves. The greatest victories in history were not won on the battlefield, but in the minds of men. Wars are fought with swords, but they are won with ideas. Consider the most influential figures throughout history. Not just kings and generals, but philosophers, strategists, and visionaries. They did not need to impose their will with brute strength. Instead, they planted ideas, guided emotions, shaped perspectives. And their enemies, believing they were acting of their own free will, walked willingly into their own downfall. The first rule of influence is simple. People do not resist what they do not perceive as control. If a man knows he is being manipulated, he will fight back. But if he believes his choices are his own, if he thinks he is acting in his own best interest, he will never question the path set before him. This is why direct control is weak. It invites resistance. True control is invisible. It works not by confrontation, but by suggestion. Your enemy is ruled by something. No man is free from influence. He is guided by his desires, his fears, his need for validation. He believes himself to be independent, but in reality, he is a slave to unseen forces, his ego, his insecurities, his ambitions. Your task is to understand these forces better than he does. If your enemy is driven by pride, feed his arrogance. Let him believe he is invincible, untouchable, beyond challenge. He will become reckless, overconfident, blind to danger. If he is fueled by greed, present him with opportunities too tempting to resist. He will chase them without seeing the trap they lead him into. If he is ruled by fear, amplify his paranoia. Make him see enemies where there are none, threats in every shadow, until his own mind destroys him from within. The power of influence lies in subtlety. It is never a command, never an obvious push. It is a whisper, suggestion, a seed planted in the mind that grows into conviction. A skilled manipulator does not tell his enemy what to do. He makes his enemy believe it was his own idea all along. History is filled with those who have mastered this art. Take the ancient Chinese strategist Sun Tzu, who wrote in The Art of War. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. He understood that the best way to destroy an opponent is to make them destroy themselves, to shape their choices so that every move they make brings them closer to defeat. Imagine a kingdom on the verge of war. Two rival factions seek control, each believing they are on the path to victory. But unseen by either side, a third force, a quiet strategist, works in the shadows. He does not fight. He does not challenge either side openly. Instead, he whispers into the right ears, shifts alliances without being noticed, inflames rivalries just enough to make them self-destructive. And in the end, both factions crumble, leaving the strategist in control without ever drawing his sword. Now imagine your own enemy. He believes himself to be powerful, in control of his destiny. But if you understand his weaknesses, his blind spots, his desires, you can shape his path without him ever knowing. A man ruled by his emotions is predictable. A man who is predictable is easy to guide. And a man who can be guided can be led anywhere, even to his own ruin. There is no need to attack directly when you can make your enemy believe he is leading himself into battle. There is no need to fight when you can shape the war itself. And there is no need to destroy a man when he is willing to dismantle himself piece by piece, as long as you provide the right push at the right moment. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, understood this deeply. He wrote, "He who is brave is free." A man who has mastered himself, who controls his own mind and emotions, is beyond the reach of manipulation. But your enemy is not free. He is a prisoner of his own weaknesses, his own impulses. And as long as that is true, you do not need to fight him. You only need to understand him better than he understands himself. The greatest war is not fought with weapons, but with perception. The greatest enemy is not defeated by force, but by influence. And the greatest victory is not won through battle, but by making your enemy walk willingly into his own downfall, never realizing that every step he took was guided by your unseen hand. Way 5. The power of absence, destroying your enemy by vanishing. There is a force stronger than direct confrontation, deadlier than revenge, and more powerful than any words or actions. It is the power of absence, the ability to withdraw, to disappear, to become a ghost in the mind of your enemy. This is the silent art of destruction, the method that leaves no trace, no evidence, no battle scars, and yet it is the one that inflicts the deepest wounds. To understand why absence is so powerful, one must first understand human nature. The greatest pain a man can experience is not physical. It is the pain of uncertainty, of irrelevance, of being unable to control what he once thought was within his grasp. People do not fear what they can see, what they can fight, what they can grasp with their hands and strike down. They fear the unknown. They fear silence. They fear being ignored. Your enemy, no matter how powerful he appears to be, feeds off something. He thrives on your attention, your reaction, your resistance. Even if he seeks to harm you, he still depends on your presence in his world to confirm his own power. He needs to see you, to hear you, to feel the weight of your response. And the moment you remove yourself completely from his reach, you take away the very thing that gives him strength. The ancient Stoics understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most disciplined minds in history, wrote in Meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This means that the most effective way to gain power over an enemy is not to engage with him, but to make him irrelevant in your world. To remove yourself from his influence so completely that he is left grasping at shadows. Imagine a man who insults you, who slanders your name, who seeks to provoke you into battle. If you respond, if you defend yourself, if you fight back, you give him what he wants. You validate his attack. You show him that his words have power. But if you do nothing, if you remove yourself from his reach, if you disappear completely from his sight, you rob him of his purpose. He becomes a man shouting into an empty void, his anger echoing back at him with no one to receive it. And soon his rage consumes itself, because there is nothing left to fuel it. This is the same principle that drives the downfall of tyrants, manipulators, and those who seek to control others. A ruler who demands obedience only has power because people respond. The moment the people stop listening, stop fearing, stop acknowledging his existence, his power collapses. A manipulator who feeds on control over others only thrives as long as people react to him. The moment they ignore him, the moment they refuse to play his game, he becomes powerless. But this strategy is not just about ignoring, it is about strategic withdrawal. It is about knowing when to vanish, how to create a void so deep in the mind of your enemy that he becomes obsessed with your absence. This is the key difference between simple avoidance and true power. Avoidance is passive, but the calculated use of absence is a weapon. There is a reason why those who disappear leave the greatest impact. A man who leaves without explanation, without a word, without closure, he lingers in the minds of others longer than one who stays and fights. A confrontation can be resolved, an argument can be won or lost, but a sudden, unexplained absence, that creates questions, that creates doubt, and doubt is the slow poison that eats away at the mind of your enemy. History is filled with examples of those who mastered this art. Consider the legends of great warriors, who rather than fighting to the death, vanished into the mountains, becoming myths. Their absence made them immortal. Consider the political strategists who, rather than engaging in direct conflict, withdrew from the public eye at the right moment, only to let their enemies destroy themselves. Consider the men who, rather than chasing after those who betrayed them, walked away completely, leaving nothing behind but silence, and in doing so haunted their enemies far more than if they had sought revenge. Now apply this to your own life. Your enemy may expect you to fight, to argue, to defend yourself. He may want you to acknowledge his power, his influence, his ability to control you. But what happens when you remove yourself entirely? When you refuse to engage? When you vanish so completely that he is left with nothing but his own reflection? He begins to doubt himself. He begins to question whether he had any power at all. He begins to realize that without you as an opponent, he is nothing. The greatest warriors are not those who win battles, but those who make the battle unnecessary. The greatest victory is not defeating an enemy, but making him realize that he was never a threat to begin with. And the most powerful move you can make is to leave, not in weakness, not in surrender, but in absolute, unshakable certainty that his existence no longer affects yours. Epictetus, another great Stoic thinker, said, "If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation." This means that your greatest power is in refusing to be provoked at all. In recognizing that the moment you react, you give your enemy power. But the moment you walk away, the moment you vanish from his world, you become untouchable. This is the silent destruction of an enemy. No war, no words, no revenge, just absence. An absence so deep, so profound, so absolute that it leaves nothing behind but the echo of his own failure. Way 6. The inevitable collapse, letting time and fate destroy your enemy for you. There is a force greater than rage, stronger than strategy, and deadlier than any weapon a man can wield. It is a force that no one can escape, no king can bribe, and no warrior can fight against. This force is time. And those who understand how to wield it become masters of destruction, not through action, but through patience. The greatest truth about power is that it is temporary. Every man, no matter how strong, how cunning, how feared, will one day crumble beneath the weight of his own flaws. The universe does not need your hand to destroy your enemy. It is already in motion. The seeds of his downfall are already planted, and all you need to do is watch them grow. The weak seek immediate revenge. They burn with anger, desperate to strike back, to destroy their enemy as quickly as possible. But this impatience blinds them. It makes them reckless, exposing their own weaknesses in their rush to retaliate. The wise, however, understand that time itself is the most ruthless executioner. They do not fight their enemies, they simply step aside and let time do the work. Consider the nature of power. It is like a tower built upon sand. A man may rise high, he may seem invincible, but the higher he climbs, the more fragile his position becomes. Every tyrant, every manipulator, every arrogant fool who believes himself untouchable is already on a path to his own destruction. His own vices, his own flaws, his own arrogance will bring him down. You do not need to lift a finger. All you need to do is wait. The Stoic philosopher Seneca wrote, "Time discovers truth. Time heals what reason cannot." This means that all lies, all deceptions, all falsehoods will eventually be exposed. A man who builds his power on deceit will one day be seen for what he truly is. A man who thrives on manipulation will one day find himself alone, abandoned by those he sought to control. A man who rules through fear will one day realize that fear fades, and those he oppressed will no longer bow to him. Look at history. Every great empire has collapsed. Every dictator has fallen. Every man who believed himself to be beyond consequence has faced his reckoning. It is not because someone overthrew them, it is because time itself is the ultimate enemy of all who seek to dominate others. Greed leads to excess. Arrogance leads to blindness. Injustice leads to rebellion. These forces are unavoidable. They are written into the very fabric of existence. There is a legend of a king who ruled with an iron fist, feared by all, surrounded by enemies. He sought to destroy anyone who challenged him, crushing rebellions, silencing opposition, eliminating those who stood in his way. And yet, he did not see his own decay. He grew fat with power, lazy with comfort, blind with arrogance. He made enemies not through their strength, but through his own cruelty. And when the end came, it was not a mighty warrior who struck him down. It was time. His own people turned against him. His allies abandoned him. His body weakened. His mind deteriorated. And he, who once seemed invincible, fell alone, broken, forgotten. Now consider your own enemy. He believes himself untouchable. He believes he will never face consequences. He believes his strength, his influence, his position will last forever. But you know better. You know that time spares no one. You know that arrogance is a poison that destroys from within. You know that a man who has built his life on deception, on cruelty, on greed, will one day face the weight of his own actions. You do not need to rush. You do not need to act. You only need to watch. Watch as his own choices destroy him. Watch as he alienates those who once stood beside him. Watch as he exhausts himself, fighting battles that you never needed to engage in. Watch as the walls he built to protect himself become the prison that traps him. This is not inaction. It is the highest form of strategy. It is understanding that every man is his own worst enemy, that his greed will make him reckless, that his ego will blind him, that his desire for control will push people away. And in the end, he will stand alone, not because you struck him down, but because he destroyed himself. Marcus Aurelius, the great Stoic emperor, wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." This means that your victory does not come from stooping to your enemy's level. It does not come from fighting as he fights, from seeking vengeance as he would seek it. Your victory comes from understanding that his downfall is inevitable. That time will break him long before you ever could. You may feel the urge to act, to hasten the process, to force his destruction. But impatience is a weakness. A storm does not rush to destroy. It moves slowly, steadily, inevitably. The oak tree does not collapse in an instant. It rots from within, weakening over time, until one final gust of wind sends it crashing to the ground. This is the way of nature, and it is the way of power. So step back. Watch. Let your enemy believe he is winning. Let him think he is untouchable. Let him build his empire, his fortress, his illusion of control. And when the time comes, when his own choices, his own arrogance, his own weaknesses bring him to his knees, you will be there, not as his executioner, but as a witness to his inevitable collapse. This is the final secret. The most powerful way to destroy an enemy is to let him destroy himself. And when he does, you will not need to lift a single finger. You will only need to smile, knowing that fate, time, and the universe itself have already won the battle for you.